Hi, so today I want to talk about the ethics of super advanced simulations. So once we reach a point, no matter if it takes few decades or longer than that, in any case we are in a phase of humanity where the exponential growth of technology will lead us to places unimaginable at the current moment. So what we mean to talk about here is once we can create simulations that can simulate human minds or just conscious beings, we need to collectively decide on some certain things. We need to decide on the ethics of that. Is it ethical to create and destroy conscious beings? Because a simulated being, if it has conscious experience, it should be valued exactly the same as a conscious being in the regular physical world. I wouldn't see any real difference in the human sense, in the morality and value and ethics sense, if there is the same amount of conscious experience. So what would be the ethics of that when we reach a point where we can create ancestor simulations? So simulations of our past history, simulations of, let's say, planet Earth in the year 2021. By creating that simulation, if you want the simulation to be accurate, then that simulation will have millions of people suffering in it. So what is the ethics of that? Is that ethical? What are we even talking about? Is the satisfaction of a super intelligent being's curiosity, does that outweigh the suffering of conscious creatures like us today? Would we just allow anyone to create simulations without any boundaries? So in those simulations, anything could happen. And what do we mean by would we allow? In this world where we have the capacity to create simulations, there will be no government bodies. There will be nothing like that we could compare on Earth today. It would be completely different when every human being would have access to nanomachinery to reshape the world around them and have access to computing power to create many simulations easily. If we would try to put some restrictions on that, first, it would create a dystopia, and second of all, people would always find ways to circumnavigate any rules. If you have a simulation and you have some definition that you can't have conscious beings who suffer in this simulation, what does that mean? Because was it the Buddha or was it the Dalai Lama who said that existence is just suffering? So how far do you draw the line of what exactly constitutes suffering? Just existing, being unhappy. So your simulation couldn't have any conscious beings in them because of the threat of the possibility of them possibly experiencing the feeling of suffering. So you couldn't have that. You couldn't have that restriction. And of course, enforcing those restrictions would get really complicated. One thing, so many questions. One thing that I would also throw in the mix would be that what we're really talking about here is post-singularity. We are talking about a time where we have artificial general intelligence and presumably artificial superintelligence. So the world will be unimaginably different, and what we are will be unimaginably different as well. What will we choose to be? It will be up to us. If you could transcend into a being that's thousands of times more intelligent and smart, you wouldn't be a human being anymore. In fact, if we would have the capacity to be hundreds of times smarter, for example, we would certainly look back, even now we look back and understand that there are so many parts of us that are dysfunctional monkey brains that make us do stupid shit, that make us suffer, and that make us hurt other people. Why carry these things around with us? I'm sure that we would carry some things with us, but that would purely for sentimental and nostalgic value, not for any practical purposes. So if you would transcend into being this super intelligent being, then obviously you would be not a human anymore. Also, talking about suffering in simulations and the threat of people creating simulations just to create hell for people for their own satisfaction. So that is something that some people have talked about, that they would be afraid of, that people would create these artificial hells for people. And When we look at the future and when we think about the future, one mistake that we make is that we sort of think of the world being as it is today with just one aspect being changed. For example, with simulations, we imagine this future with simulations of being like our society today and people being like they are today, except that we have the capacity to create simulations. But when we really want to be more accurate, honest and truthful, then we have to admit that first of all, we have no idea how it will look like such a future after the singularity. And second, that so many other things will change that, genuinely it is impossible for us to factor all of those things into how technology itself as it is right now intertwines in so many different ways. Fields that before were separate now are beginning to overlap. And we make so many different and new discoveries, and increasingly different fields of science overlap, and we make different discoveries. Anyway, what I wanted to say is that I don't think we need to fear, creating artificial hells, because like we talked about, if you have this choice of being like 100 times smarter, we collectively as human beings, we could throw away everything bad about being this monkey ape, which would be pretty much the entirety of our egos, almost, for most people, perhaps. But we wouldn't keep around among us people who are psychopaths, people who want to create that miserable thing, people who want to harm other people, themselves are suffering. You never see a happy person going around wanting to make other people feel bad. It's always the deeply unhappy people who want to make other people feel unhappy. So if you eliminate depression, if you eliminate this sort of monkey egoistic drives and things, then you will eliminate the threat and the types of people that would create artificial hells. So no longer it would be a concern in that sense. That any person would just be like a human today, like a messed up human, and they would create the hell. No, we could cure all that, we could fix all that. So I don't think that that's a serious problem if we're actually thinking about the post-singularity world. In a way, it is crazy to think about the post-singularity world because it would be a free-for-all. There wouldn't be concentrations of power. The power would be everywhere. And the need for one person to hold on to power, like Jeff Bezos, for someone like that would go away, because again, we could eliminate those monkey instincts. The way that we today try to eliminate depression or anger issues or anxieties with pills and therapies and stuff, in a post-singularity world, even before that, we could completely eliminate those things. And we would have a civilization that would be filled with every single individual being a genuine human being that could enjoy life and share life with each other, and we could work together, think together. So that would no longer be an issue. So I think that's an important thing to consider, that we will not need to live, and I'm certain that we will not choose to live and carry on with these mental illnesses. Anything that makes someone a douchebag or asshole, those are mental illnesses, those are faults with people, traumatic events that shape people in ways. And, we need to think about the definition of mental illness. In a funny way, most people alive today, at least in cities, are absolutely insane. Brainwashed by a capitalistic society, brainwashed by nationalism, brainwashed by so many different biases that have carried on from generation to generation. So it is quite insane, and I think it's interesting to think how deep into the brain do we need to go to eliminate these kind of illnesses, and what do we define as illnesses. I think one definition would be delusions about the world, where someone has a belief about the world that is just inaccurate. Like people who think that we didn't go to the moon. Even better, people who think that the earth is flat. Like that is a clear, obvious delusion that we could fix. And how many of those delusions would there be then? I think many. I think once we have this power and technology to help people, to heal people, to fix them, like imagine just like either the perfect combination of drugs. We have some AI system who is super advanced, who looks at you for a moment, your past history, whatever, can perfectly determine the perfect drug combination for you to make you fucking normal, or we have nanorobotics that go into your brain and can realign your neurons and connections in ways that make you a healthy human being. And then you can continue the process of healing. Many ways how we could do that in that world where pretty much what we now consider magic would be possible. And I think one possible thing that will happen is that, after these kind of healing treatments or whatever are distributed, it will not be, again, we are limited by our imagination, because I know some people have thought, well, there are a bunch of people who will resist these treatments against them, and in today's world that would be the case. But in the future, when we have AGI or ASI, a super intelligent being, that could perfectly look at every single individual and tailor the treatment for them, so to speak, treatment. In a way that it would be obvious to the person that it would be the right thing, this obviously beneficial thing to go with it and to accept that treatment. So there would be no doubt, there would be no need for, debates or arguments or whatever. That I think is interesting, that would be just one of those things that will be obvious to human beings. And we would collectively be uplifted, and most people would have some kind of an ego death. Imagine some, American in some small town who is racist and whatever, and then suddenly that person realizes that, countries are imaginary, and it doesn't matter what the color of his skin is, none of those things matter. We're all human beings. We are the result of some random molecules few billion years ago wiggling around in an ocean just by accident, making a copy of itself and another copy of itself and a few more copies of itself, and the ones that were better at making copies of themselves, those continued to get better at protecting them and making more copies of themselves. And a few billion years later, and we get to here, and you realize there is no right or wrong, there is no good or bad. But what is real, the only real thing, is that we exist and we are conscious beings and we feel things. And to us, at least, it is good to feel good things, it is bad to feel bad things. But it would be such a transformative experience. But there are so many questions. I think we cannot predict what the questions will be. I think once we are post-singularity, once we have a super intelligence who can fix all of these global issues that we have caused with our relentless chase for profit and money, and how messed up the world has become, climate change, global warming, wealth inequality, all of those things will be just these funny, weird things in the past, will no longer be issues. And I think then the possibility would be that we could, as a civilization, turn inward, and we could live all in simulations, either our own private simulations or a collective simulation. Definitely the possibility, the potential of computing power is such that we could each have our own simulations and collectively visit each other's, and we could turn into beings currently unimaginable. We could expand our consciousness, beyond what we currently can even imagine, and that kind of world will be very different. And it is so weird to think about, like, the universe and any sort of sense of purpose, how weird it is that we live in a reality where things can exist. Maybe most bizarre of all, that conscious creatures can exist who think and feel things. And it does make me at least wonder, like, what is the point of it all, and where did it come from, and how weird it is that we exist and feel things. There is a group of people who say that consciousness is an illusion. To them I say that they are an illusion. If you say that consciousness is an illusion, to me that's just a laughable lack of self-awareness. But it can also be just the definition of words meaning different things to different people. That's the problem with language. Post-singularity, we would have brain-to-brain communication by technologies that are infants right now, like Neuralink, but will expand into things like we can have a global internet with billions of human brains intertwined with each other, sharing thoughts, feelings, emotions, ideas, way beyond that we currently can imagine. And those, that's just insane to think about. And we are headed in that direction. We are not far away. We are in this time of getting closer to artificial general intelligence. And once that happens, the world as we know it will change, as I have said in so many different videos. But it's insane to me that currently, by someone a bit more ignorant, someone would look at me as an insane person, when actually it's absolutely insane that most of the people on the planet have no clue about this, what's actually coming in the next decades and what's going on at the moment. But it will become apparently obvious to everyone in the next few decades how the world is changing. It's so weird that this isn't talked about more. So that's why I do what I do. I feel an obligation to share this with you. Just these thoughts. I'm sure a lot of what I say is inaccurate. Again, it's the problem of words as well, so I hope you get the general idea of what I'm trying to say. Anyway, the future will be really, really crazy and really, really exciting at least. So so this was some thoughts about the ethics and just ideas around simulations and the future. I hope there was something interesting here for you. If you have any thoughts, please share them in the comments. And of course, thank you so much for watching and take care.